All right, welcome everybody to the WP crowd. Our new day and time, Friday. Wow, I am embarrassingly gonna say that I almost didn't make it because I was sleeping and totally forgot that we were doing it today. So I hope that our viewers didn't forget. Um, but it should be a good one. Today we're talking about backups and transition plans. So basically, what happens if you get hit by a bus? What happens to the website? So first, let's do some introductions. Let's start off on my left with Jonathan, a guest today.
Hey, I'm Jonathan Perlman. I hope you can hear me. I'm a web developer in Montreal, Canada. I work for Dawson College, and I also do some stuff on the side with snookercanada.ca. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. And Shelly.
I'm Shelley Peacock. I have a boutique agency called the Spinbird Group, and we are WordPress consultants, and we pretty much wrangle clients on a daily basis.
Awesome. So today we're talking about kind of two things that are very similar. I find that these conversations kind of intermix with each other. Um, when someone asks what's the best way to back up a site or even move a site, a lot of the same tools and a lot of the same things kind of come into play. So let's just start with the basics. Why you should back up. And I think the best way, honestly, to answer why you should back up, because it's a clear. I mean, there's an obvious answer to that question. So let's not talk about why you should. Let's talk about some horror stories, because that's always the best way to convince people they should be backing up. Jonathan, do you have any horror stories from, let's say, a time you didn't back up?
Actually, yes, I did. It's not about not the backup because, well, I moved from another hosting company. So I moved from one hosting company to another hosting company, and I moved all the data, no problem. And we also transitioned from one sort of site to a WordPress site. So the client asked about, oh, can we have historical information about all this stuff? It's like, yeah, I don't have backups. I don't know where the data is. I can't find it. So essentially, we lost about 10 years of history and stats, and it was kind of painful because we don't know where we're going. Well, we didn't know where we're going about all that kind of stuff, and like we only had about a year's worth of stuff. We didn't have 10 years, so we couldn't make a really good informed decision.
What about you, Shelley? Do you have any horror stories from a lack of backup?
Not really. Mine has more been moving server to server, or I actually have had. I do triple redundant backups, which is probably nuts, but my server company keeps 3 sets, and then I have 2 other offsite backups that I send them to. So I'm pretty secure with that. My biggest problem is email and moving email and email history and all that stuff. So
That's a good point of the good part of the transition plan. So for me, I've quite a few experiences through the years. I won't say I'm not going to say I'm a good backup person. I actually don't do backups generally speaking, because my host tends to do it for me. But sometimes the host doesn't do backups, or you don't have the plan for backups. So quite a few times, and I'm not going to say it's something that is horrible, but like a client will come back to me after a year or two, and I've already removed their files off my computer, and they'll say, "Hey, something happened to our host. Our server crashed. Do you have the files?" This actually just happened to me not that long ago. A client of mine, from like 2-3 years ago, came back to me, and they forgot to pay their hosting company for a long enough time, I guess, that the hosting company shut down their site, and they didn't care. They removed all their files. So they're like, hey, do you have all those files from that site you built for us like 3 years ago? And I was like, nope, not at all. So yeah, backups do come in handy, whether you're a developer or you're a business owner. So let's talk about some tools. Shelly, you said that, and I, we both kind of said that our host does it for us. Do you have any other plugins or tools that you use, Shelly?
To address what you just said about the client coming back and needing their site back, I have a 2 terabyte external hard drive that whenever I get finished with a site, because my computer is totally full now, so whenever I get finished with a site, I just end up putting it onto that external hard drive and just move it over there. So I actually have just by default, and I had that same thing, a client that came back, she had me build a site and decided she didn't want to do it, and then a year later she changed her mind, do you still have it? And luckily, it was a backup zip that I could deploy in about 15 minutes. I am a giant Backup Buddy fan. I have used it. It was literally the first backup plugin I started with in 2009, so I have been through all the iterations with them. Can't love on that one enough. So it makes it super easy. It's a couple clicks to migrate a site, to restore from a backup, and it's got great settings tools and schedule and blah blah blah. So that's what I use. It's awesome.
How about you, Jonathan? What do you use for backups? Is it a host thing, or do you have plugins that you use?
I actually don't do any plugins. I've got all. Well, the thing is, for Snooker Canada, it's all server level backups. So I take all the files, I zip them, tar them, I move them all to another server. I do a data center. I move it to a different data center. I don't even have the backups in the same geographical location as the sites. So in the event that the West Coast or East Coast, something, because catastrophic happens, well, I move the files over. So everything's server level done there. And same thing for the database. I back it all up to server level. I've got this tool from SourceForge, AutoMySQL Backup, and what that does is that it does a database level backup, but it can do dailies, weeklies, monthlies, all that. So I keep snapshots of the dailies and the weeklies, and then all that, like you, Shelley, I actually back up all that to a hard drive that's sitting over here. So I don't trust anything on the cloud in the end. But so worst case scenario, I've got backup sitting right next to me. I don't actually work with them, but if I need to, I could.
Do you also back up your client work, or is it just for your work that you back up?
Well, I don't have much client work, therefore it's all Snooker Canada that we're talking about here, and that's all backed up. I have backups on my home machine. I use the program for that. And again, that's off to just an external hard drive. So I don't do much client work, so I'm not in that type of scenario.
I'm curious, Shelley. So since we have some time, I kind of want to get into this a little bit. How long do you keep a client site for? Do you have a time limit where you're like, all right, this 2 terabyte thing, I know it's huge and I have all this space, but this client from like 5 years ago, do you keep everybody and anything on that backup?
So far I have, yeah. I haven't. I've hit a little over a terabyte on space. So yeah, I'm gonna eventually have to whack some. And there are some that went out of business, or they're never ever coming back. So you just kind of, it's a judgment call.
What about bad clients that you just didn't like working with? Do you still back up their stuff?
Nope.
Oh, okay. So you don't back up everything. You just back up the ones that. Okay, that's fine.
Well, and I don't mean to say it that way necessarily, but like I lost my first client about 2 months ago, and they actually went bankrupt on all of us, and on our hosting, on our SEO, on everything. And so yeah, I deleted them because that was just such a crappy thing to do that I was like, you know what? If you ever need anything else again, I'll rebuild it from scratch, and it'll cost you twice as much. Bless your heart. So.
All right. Yeah, I just never thought about backing up hosts build. I tend to have stuff on my computer, and if it's not on my computer, then you know, it's I try to keep things in the cloud and stuff. But even then, like, I don't know, I would figure that they would. I hope that they would never come back to me asking for it, I guess. All right, so again, along with backing up, and making sure everything's backed up, another thing that closely resembles, or kind of interlocks with this conversation is transition plans. Um, and I take transition plans as, all right, there's two ways of taking this. There's one is how do you transition a site from, let's say, a dev server to a production site, and that's kind of a migration. But more importantly, how do you transition off of a project? Like, how do I maybe handle, like, if I'm working on a project and Shelly is now the new developer, how do I hand over the reins and make sure she has everything? So, what do you guys have in plan for that? Like, it's a typical thing, either post-migration or including migration. What do you guys do for those kind of things?
For me, it depends on how nice I want to be to the new developer. Let's just say that. Let's just say if it was a good developer that I wanted to give all the information to, what I would do at that point is, hand off the full folder with the Git repo, which means I have access to all the history of whatever I did on all the files and all that. I'd hand off the database as an SQL file, and then let them do what they need to do, because they're ideally a developer and they know what they're doing. But if it wasn't going to be in such a good terms, let's just say this, I'd probably use the plugin Duplicator, and I'd essentially duplicate the site so that they can install it wherever they want, and they wouldn't get the Git history at that point, as far as I know, and then it's in their hands. That's about it.
How about you, Shelly?
I really haven't had a whole lot of that type of business, because my business model is a little bit different. What I do is I take the client from asking them if they own their own domain, and they say, what's that? And so, I tend to work with the client that is very, very untech savvy. And so my handoff typically with them is I give them editor level, depending on the levels of, and I host the majority of my clients as well too. So depending on the levels of stuff they need to do, like I have one that has a giant event calendar, and so I use edit role user for that, and just add levels in like that. Typically, very rarely do I hand off an admin unless they request it. So I'm kind of like the control freak room mom when it comes to my clients. But any code that I do, I try to note it really, really well. So in the event that somebody does take over, there's at least lots and lots of notes within the files.
Yeah, so I do the same thing. Professionally speaking, my day job, there's not much else, but everything's in Git, so we're not really worried about that. Because if you need to, start working on something, there's 10 other developers that are also working on it, so really not that that intense. You just grab the repo. For migration positions of a client, I would say that the biggest thing is making sure that everything is coded to standards. And then when I transition, Jonathan brought up Duplicator. I really love the Duplicator plugin. It makes life super easy to migrate a site. However, I feel like it's a very I don't know how to put this. It's a very hit or miss kind of thing. Like Duplicator either works really, really well or it doesn't at all. That's been my experience with it. It's either, hey, 2 seconds later you have your WordPress site now on this new host and everything's wonderful and it's all working exactly like it was in your other environment, or it doesn't work at all and it gives you some vague error message and it just keeps on doing that over and over and over again. even if you like build the whole thing. Um, so I have a hard time with Duplicator. I do like trying to build out with Git and making sure that I can deploy out. Luckily, at work, we have full deploy schedules and build processes. So I'm actually not even in charge of that. That's kind of a whole nother team. Um, but for the most part, it makes life easy. Like code goes into Git. Eventually, that gets merged into the right branch. It gets put into the right onto the right server through you know essentially CLI commands. Command line commands. Uh, and I wish I have that more of a setup. Let's say locally or with other environments, but that's not always going to be the case. Most of the time, it's just FTP. So every once in a while, it's one of those. All right, let me just drag WordPress over. Let me set the install up from scratch. Let me get a content dump from the development site that has all the. And yeah, it's a pain in the butt sometimes, but transitioning can be a pain. Um, Migrating to a new developer, especially when I'm handing off a client project, um, I always love to do walkthroughs if I can with the new developer, um, or just make sure the code's commented properly enough. Just so in case, again, it's the whole what happens if I get hit by a bus thing. Um, if for whatever reason I'm now out of the picture 100% and maybe I didn't even have a chance to say anything, I'm just like, developer's not around anymore. Um, you got to make sure that everything is backed up and that everything is coded in a way that anyone can pick it up. And coding standards is a whole other conversation, so I don't want to get into it. But uh, definitely coding standards plays a huge role in all this because if you're a developer and you've ever picked up somebody else's work, it's kind of you never know what you're gonna get, and sometimes you get something like beautiful, and you're like, oh, this is awesome. This code is so good. I can easily get through it. It's just like my code. And sometimes you get jumbled up, Blender code, and no matter how hard you try, you're just like, I can't believe someone coded it this way.
I am rebuilding a site like that right now, and it was done very inexpensively overseas. Every single thing was hard coded into the theme. Misspellings, I mean, it's unbelievable. And so, yeah, we're starting from scratch.
Yeah, and sometimes you kind of have that luxury. One thing I come across a lot, especially with my day job, is that there's a lot of people that work on the sites that I work on sometimes, and while we try to have the best coding standards, you have a lot of people spanning across a lot of time as well. So they might have tried to build something in one way, 3 years ago, and that code is still there, like the base code, but then 20 other people have already added attachments or functionality to it. So by the time I look at it now, 3 years, 4 years later, I'm like, who coded it this way? This is so horrible. But, you know, either A, coding standards have changed, not really, but they're, let's say, internal coding standards, or, yeah, you just never know who's touched it. It could be someone that's not up to date with the coding standards, could be a contractor who just had a quick 2-hour kind of contract to just come in and throw in some code. And that's what I face a lot. Jonathan, do you got any of that? Because you work on pretty large websites.
Oh, absolutely. Not so large websites. Sometimes, yeah, even with the main website for Dawson College, we've got a few people in there, and yeah, you're right. There's definitely a variation on coding standards. The main developed a certain style. I've got a certain style. Other people have styles, and also for internal projects, we all have different styles, but we all have one base framework that we're all using. It's definitely a challenge to keep standards. In fact, that's one thing that I always internally grumble about, because everybody's got different ways of doing things, and even just formatting of the code, and whether to put a line break here, a line break there, you know. It's a hard in a bigger environment, I can guarantee you that, because everybody's going to do, unless there's strict policies in place, which you can't really put that in place easily, everybody's going to do what they do and code the way they code.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. So before we kind of sign off here for the day, um, do you have any other suggestions for developers or maybe people just coming into the space and you know you guys both said that you have all this backup stuff. Backup Buddy was mentioned. Are there any other tools that will help you know in that unfortunate incident? I will say that when you talk about backup, one thing I enjoy using, and it's not really a backup solution, but it just works really well as a backup, is Git. Um, I'd highly recommend using GitHub for, or you know, Bitbucket or whatever other Git solution for your code. Um, for instance, you know, when I got my new job, I had to turn in my old computer and get a new one, and my old computer had all this code on it from you know a mix of both work and some of my personal work, and it was easy to get up and running with my new computer because yeah, I had to install a couple programs, but all my code was Git, you know, in the GitHub. So all I had to do was pull the repo, and all my latest code was there. And um, you know, if I wanted to go backwards in time, I can still too. So and Git in general is a huge resource, not just for again, not for just being a developer and versioning, which is a whole nother important level, but it is a good backup source because I did buy like a 1 terabyte external hard drive when I was switching computers, and as I was looking through my code and my themes, I'm like, okay, I got to back all this up. I was like, no, I really don't because it's all in GitHub, and I really don't need to waste up space for that. So I ended up like not even using my 1 terabyte external. I have like some pictures on it, and that's about it. I was like, oh, all this code I thought I was going to be putting on it, nope, don't need to. Like, it didn't even phase me as a great backup solution until that point. Any other tips for people that are just getting started or people that are, you know, want some other solutions for backing up and making sure that they're ready for, you know, that inevitable bus hitting?
Well, you know, one of the things about the bus hitting that I really want to point out is all of like with a business like mine, where I you know take my clients start to finish, and I have all the logins, and I have all, you know, I always make them buy their own domains because I don't ever want to be responsible for that. Had a couple of nightmares locally here with that, where a guy literally did die, and they couldn't get their domains for 6 months because it had to go through GoDaddy probate. So one thing that I personally, what I do, I have a VA that has literally every site that I start, she gets an immediate admin login, and she has all the passwords, all the backup information. She has root access to my server. So you know, in the event that I do get hit by a bus or keel over, you know, and I also have a hard filing system. Literally, I have files here, and I make notes on everything. So, you know, I try to make it really, really easy for somebody to come in right behind me and go, okay, client A, here's your login, here's your password, blah, blah, blah. You know, for somebody else to take it over. That also has kind of set me up for the eventuality that if I ever want to become a lunch lady and quit doing this, I've got it all ready to hand over and sell. So, for what that's worth.
A lunch lady, huh? I could.
That's always been my big joke when I get into it. When I get into a project, you know how you hit that, I call it the black hole, but the black hole zone of, oh my God, I have no idea why I signed up for this. And that's my joke, is I'm just going to go be a lunch lady. Less pressure. But
I totally understand. Unfortunately, it's like, hey, I took on this client. I don't know why I did. I should just go be my developer self somewhere else because
yeah.
ultimately that's my backup plan. Is either I'm a developer as a consultant or I'm a developer full time. Jonathan, do you have anything?
Just to echo on what Shelley's been saying, yeah, absolutely. Communication between people. Specifically at Dawson, we all have access to servers, and we all have and it's all controlled by that. So we all can get in to do whatever we need to do, and
Sorry.
phone. So we all can back people up, no problem. even on vacations and whatnot, and long term, even for anything. So that's not a big deal. Documented standards, processes, yes, we have those. And but even for my stuff outside, it's with Stuff for Canada. There is a person out there that he's got a copy of all the passwords, every single password. He doesn't know what to do with it, but he's got a copy of it. And I
You
tell
gave a
people
talk at WordCamp Toronto, right, or WordCamp Montreal on backing up.
WordCamp
Uh,
Toronto, yeah.
so what did you talk about in that during the talk?
I talked about migrating sites, migrating from WordPress.com to WordPress.org, migrating sites from a development to production, and that kind of process. So the pitfalls and the plugins, the process also. So yeah,
What do you know? Did they put that talk online?
it's online. It's on YouTube and it's on WordPress.tv.
Awesome. So if anyone needs any further, wants any further knowledge, feel free to check out Jonathan on WordPress.tv or YouTube, talking about backups and stuff like that. But for now, I think we're done. So thank you guys for joining us. This has been an awesome show on backing up. I hope you guys tune in next week. I hope I remember next week.
I'll remind.
This morning was a little rough. But next week should be better. Hopefully we'll have a good show planned. And thank you guys for joining us. I will see you guys next week.
No problem.
Thank you.